We're going to do another panel here on guided pathways. If we can bring one of our chairs out here. Hey, Sam. Can we bring that chair, please? Thank you. We heard Sean's name referenced earlier, but we're gonna get to meet Sean here, and then we need both mics, please. Okay, great. All right, there we go. Gary Moser, he's the Chief Information Officer at Kern Community College District. We also have Sean Nickel, Data Scientist at Kern County College District as well. Gentlemen, nice to see you.
Pleasure.
The infamous Sean. How are you, sir? I know Gary referenced you early on in our conversation. So we want to talk about, and this is, I think it's very timely. I don't know if this is the parent in me or it's just someone who spends time with technologists and those in higher education, but to understand guided pathways, how they have changed over time, and really sort of the steps taken based on the analysis of where we need to go. So Gary, I'm going to hand it to you and say, at what point in the story does Sean's skill set need to come in to, I think, add to the narrative that we're gonna weave here together?
Yeah, so thank you, appreciate that. And just to let you know, Sean's the brains behind this outfit. Okay, I'm just a pretty face. I know, after lunch that's not good, but nonetheless, Sean's going to be able to go into the detail on you. He's our data analyst and help mastermind this thing really going forward. I'll start off with a little bit of a history perspective because you mentioned guided pathways. And that has a different meaning to different people because it's been floated.
I'm just going to ask because it feels a little bit like a term that we think we understand what it means.
It is. I'm going to suggest to you the way we interpret it or using it is really about how we want to help students in this specific aspect of their journey. Because to me, guided pathways is a very broad topic. And so what we're trying to do is find a way, the goal was really to find a way to allow students to achieve their degree or their certificate or whatever their goal was in the soonest and most effective way possible to get them to their next level, whether it be to a CSU in our case, and many of our students do, or to a job that they may have, whatever the case might be, and allow for those course corrections along the way in simple terms of awareness by the student through their counselor or advisor to allow them to say, hey, you know, this course you're thinking about taking, it might take you a little longer to get your degree. You probably want to focus on this course based on this availability and go in that direction. So we were seeing students, and this is not just unique to Kern, this is across.
And was this pre-AI?
This was a beginning of AI. I won't say it was pre-AI. It depends on what you want to, when you want to date it. So I'll leave it up to you.
Okay.
But the idea behind this was to utilize that technology to allow our counselors and advisors to quickly see Billy, whoever that student might be, you want to take this course and this will get you through the program much faster, or initially take these courses, we can get you in here and out of here in 2 years instead of, depending on your point of view, 4 years or 5 years or 3 years, how long it takes you to sit in the community college system. Now, there's a lot of reasons why students take longer, not all of them bad, but nonetheless, it's important for that. And also to allow them to save their financial aid money for the CSU, for an example.
Because time is money.
Time is money, and you only get so much of it in your school career. So we would hate to see a student use up their financial aid before they even got a chance to start their 4-year degree program. So that's kind of the overview I'm going to suggest that we were looking at inception. And what we did is we initially partnered with AWS to help us design this and set it up because we had, in our case, we had moved to the AWS cloud many years before to empty our data center. And so we worked with them on the initial design and process to go forward. And again, I should say Sean did a lot of that work, mainly in that format. And that's where we have at least set the foundation for going forward.
To launch it from there.
From there, and how we could then utilize technology to help our counselors and advisors better serve our students. Because I think in a previous panel, I think maybe it was even Jory when I was on earlier with him, you mentioned ratios of 800 or 900 to 1, right? That's an enormous workload for a counselor and advisor. And it's just so difficult to spend the time that you need with the students that need the help the most.
So Sean, let's go back before we go forward. I'm going to pull in a sort of a question that I had there for Rick Torres, which is, I'm going to make a wild guess, he's a little bit younger than we are. That's a good thing. But
A lot of my memes, go ahead. Yeah.
help me understand your generation and the relationship and the level of comfort you have with data, because I hear what Gary's talking about, and it makes me anxious just thinking about sort of all the tentacles, right? And the things that are hiding behind in the shadows that we haven't thought about or that we need to think about. And yet I get the sense that there's a calm, right? I mean, it's still, but you're in your element. So tell me a little bit about your journey to get to this point to where you can then spot, because this is about pattern recognition, is it not? Yeah. Right, to some degree, and then being able to apply the technology that it's at hand for us to use?
Yeah, I think younger people and people even younger than me, they're really I think Jeff mentioned earlier, they're really used to having things curated towards them, and they're really used to their data being used to give them content that fits what they're after, and that may be something that a lot of people older than myself sometimes they may not like it, or it may be something that's relatively new. But I think that that's a big piece of how data is being used, with the younger generation. Because you mentioned Netflix and Spotify and those things, and the recommendations that they're giving. And so I think data for me has shaped my journey, because once I got here to the district, I really felt like there was a lot of questions on how we can use certain pieces of data to help serve students and use it all for good, and so that's really what I've tried to focus on, using data in ways that will benefit the student, make their life better, hopefully help to eliminate bad things like fraud, and help improve things like guided pathways, help improve student course taking strategies, and ultimately just optimize efficiency, like Gary was talking about, in the way that counselors can interact with the students.
So Sean, like I'll say like 8 to 10 years ago or whatever it was, that the buzzword was around personalization, K-20, right? And so then you had to think about all the different, in essence, paths so that we could customize per student, per need, per pathway. But now we've evolved that, right? And so we're talking about sort of guiding or creating those pathways. Talk a little bit about the conversations that you would have to have with the Garys of the world when it came to how do we define what a pathway is and what it is not, maybe more importantly, to understand how you could better serve students.
Yeah, so when we were looking at guided pathways in the beginning, I actually had a lot of learning to do as well from AWS about and from Gary and from the rest of the California Community College system and KCCD as well, on what a guided pathway, what a pathway really is. I was pretty green at the time that this project started. I was basically in the first guided pathway meeting, I think my second day working with the district, and so I had a lot to learn as well, but I knew that I had different skills and knowledge that I could also bring to the table too. And I think something that was really intriguing to me is that we can know a lot about pathways by just the simple order of courses. That's what our the base of the model that we built around guided pathways to help recommend courses is built on sequenced course-taking history of previous completers. And so we use that as sort of the North Star for what an aligned pathway is. We call it the centroid, the center of the cluster per program of the different successful students. And we try to measure alignment for other students to get closer to what has been successful for previous completers. And so I think it's a much different way to look at a pathway, one that maybe hadn't been fully explored, but with the help of AWS and with the whole California Community College system, it's been a really interesting experience to learn and understand more about optimizing these pathways.
So Sean's talking about sort of integrating in these different elements, right, with AWS. So Gary, help me understand or provide context for all of us in the inputs from the humans in regards to faculty and students to help define and or to identify that like negative space in a painting of what it isn't as you're going along, I guess to pressure test. Like in essence, how do we understand, we talked about this earlier, that definition of what success is, because the pathway today is going to obviously evolve and change sort of with every data point that comes in, identifying successful students along the way historically.
Yeah, so Sean's the one, obviously, that put the data together, and he's talking about a really, I call it an explosion map, simply because it gives you a wake-up call, I think, in what students are normally taking as it relates to this program of study, whether it be nursing, whether it be history, whatever their chosen desire is, and seeing what those outliers might be and how to address that in terms of sharing it with the students so they can make an informed decision and discussing it with their counselors and advisors of moving that forward. And once you have, I think, that information available to you, then maybe to your question, from our point of view of understanding this, and these are conversations we've had with leadership at Kern, with cabinet, sharing why we want to do this and what we're out to gain for our students. These maps for the various program can help us show, whether it be just next semester or beyond, where the student may want to be. So I go back to my days when I was in college. I'm a product of the California community college system. At that time, I was in the military. So I was able to understand, wow, this is going to be a challenge because this month I have duty and there's no way I can take a class for that period. But what does that do to my overall program? And so helping understand the impact of this and where I can jump back into the process is a very important point. And that's one of the things that we've shared with our leadership with the district, beyond what the pure data shows that Sean's been working on.
What were some of the main questions? Sorry to cut you off, Gary. When it came to discussing this with leadership of different disciplines within the system, because you're having to be a storyteller in that, right? I mean, you're sort of saying, here's the current challenge, here's where we are, here's where we think we need to be going. So what were those discussions like? Were there things that surprised you in what was already sort of known and applied in the general thinking? Or were there things areas you had to pivot because you'd made an assumption as a team that this was already common knowledge, but yet it wasn't?
Yeah, and I'm going to suggest to you that there were two times when that occurred, because as you heard in our talk earlier with fraud, we were down this path and working on this, and then boom, fraud hit. And guess what changed our pivot? We shifted Sean. Part of his discussion in looking at our optimal path is our key word that we've been using on defining this. The team noticed, and probably Sean, I'm going to give Sean more, continue to give him credit for this, noticed that, hey, you know, we see them going down this is the data points we're collecting. We see them going down this path, but we noticed when these elements were popular or high profile, there was a high percentage of fraud. So that's how we gleaned over to the fraud solution at Kern and provided immediate impact. So we pivoted, I'm going to say for the most part, away from this project to jump into our fraud. Now, going back to your initial question on how this impacted the storytelling to cabinet, to leadership, and what we had, the initial part was what we had heard at our environment was students are spending a lot of time in community colleges. Why is that? And how can we help them? Well, I don't know that we found the reason why other than the courses they took. But how can we help them? Well, we can help them identify and help the counselors identify these courses as they relate to their program of study and why they're off. Why is a student that may be a nursing major taking Fire Sciences 101? Not a lot of correlation. So why would they do that in terms of getting through the program sooner so they could achieve their goals? So we had those discussions. And then with fraud being an impact to everybody, we had those discussions again in cabinet when we went back to this program. We learned a lot in terms of retention and optimal path. So how did then we come about and say, well, what did we glean from this? What did we learn from that? How can we move this forward? So those were the discussions we had in terms of the Fraud Task Force Committee, but moving it to guided pathways, we wanted to make sure that we could continue on and move back to this project and be successful going forward. So we're getting very close. We're in UAT at this point with the help of end-to-end. So we knew we had a design and we needed to operationalize it. And we needed to make sure, because Sean is the only guy we got doing this work. And we're not unusual for our system at all. So how do we then go about evolving to moving this forward and expanding it to the system? So as part of my work as a CTO of the Digital Center, looking at this opportunity and being able to say, now let's scale this. What are the challenges we have in scaling? In our system, we have 3 primary ERP systems that people use where we pull the data. We have Banner, we have Callie, we have PeopleSoft. And so how are we then able to move this to a system-wide collective? And that's our next step after we complete UAT.
Got it. Okay, so Sean, hearing that, I'm very curious because and I appreciate you saying this, you came in a little bit green on the front end of it, right? And you were dropped in the second day of the guided pathways discussion. Help me understand that learning curve of trusting your gut when it came to understanding and analyzing the data, what was before you, and then how that converts into the possibilities in the conversations you have with Gary and the like about what can be done now that we're in essence getting our arms around the data sets that we're now sort of seeing right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, trusting the gut is something that it was really uncomfortable to do that. I remember even with fraud, there was the first day where we started using the model, and we were going to actually be placing holds based off of the work that that we had done, and things like that. It's at some point you've tested and you've validated and you've gone over the numbers and it still doesn't take away sort of the nerves of trusting your gut, trusting what the data tells you that you're looking at, and saying, okay, it's time to move this to something that's actually working. And I bring up fraud because you don't want to put barriers in front of students who are real, of course. If they're not fraudulent and you have different holds on them, that's never a good thing, So I guess that's where the trusting your gut element comes in. Is it's more of getting acclimated over and over with data to where you're so prepared that you know what you're doing is right. Something I think about somewhat frequently is, I was asking a teacher one time, I was like, I've studied everything for this test, I don't know what else to study. What do you think I should study? And he was like, well, I think you're ready. And so I was like, oh, okay. So that's kind of one of the things I think about frequently when it comes to poring over data over and over. And
you bring up an important point, Sean. Like last night, I don't know if you were here, but Dr. Jeannie Kim was really talking about sort of keeping that human connection, right? And so I don't know if the audience can feel this, but I can just tell when you were saying that, it was, this is real. These are not just data sets. They could represent an actual student and what's happening if I sort of go forward and execute this operation that will then keep them from a seat, right? The responsibility of that. Now let's sort of pivot from that, Sean, and think about the excitement in the role that you have, because it's not static, right? I would imagine that there are a lot of things coming down the pike. How do you think about envisioning the pathway of the future, and what are you keeping your eye on that maybe the rest of us aren't, just to test your own hypotheses to say, I'm wondering if this data set that's sort of on the side may sort of leapfrog something that currently is predominant in our calculation.
Yeah, thinking about my workflow in the future going forward, I was actually just talking to some of our end-to-end partners about how it's a really exciting time to be in this space in higher education, because it's a lot of the technology, a lot of the opportunities are brand new. And I was considering how I'm really lucky where I am because, like Gary said, if we were going to try to do some of this stuff all on our own, like rolling out certain models and things that we've made, it would take a lot of time from me specifically, and I would more or less be, stuck doing something that, I would be monopolizing all my time on one thing. But since we get to work with great partners, I get to help build models here, and then we can help hand it off, and then help build certain things here, hand those off as well. And just looking in the future, something that Gary had mentioned was how the optimal path, we've done some sort of preliminary studies on how the optimal path correlates with fraud. And certain things like that are really interesting to me in the future to see how we could use that data more thoroughly in ways that it's hard to be picked up on, by fraud and fraudsters and things like that, so that they wouldn't be able to iterate as quickly. And another area I'm interested in is, and this is kind of a fully different project, but it's another way I'm thinking that we use data in the future is by when we give data to our colleges and they have dashboarding and reporting and things, using kind of changing what they know of as self-service reporting, being able to do natural language querying and things like that. That's one of the areas that I'm really interested kind of for the future in serving our colleges.
How do you, Sean, and then I want to get back to Gary, but how do you plan for, I don't know if you can, but if we live in a world where AI potentially is going to change the majors, sort of the pathways that we might take, or how we might get to a certain destination of desire professionally, how do we understand how pliable sort of the pathway needs to be, given that we have this, this outlier here in AI that could be changing the very data that we're basing our pathways on? How do you understand that? Is it something that keeps you up at night, or is it an exciting thing to monitor?
It is a little bit. It does, when I think about it, it's it keeps someone up at night for sure. Yeah. When I think about it, I always consider the fact that there's going to be different programs. There's going to be different industries that people are. There will be AI-related majors and things like that. That'll, maybe there's going to be an AI accountability degree that you can get, or credential you can earn. And so there's going to be, the landscape is going to change for programs and stuff. And I sometimes think, well, are we going to have to redo everything? Is everything going to become undone? But it seems like as changes happen, we sort of flow right along with them. And it's not like everything is upended at one time. You get some time to work through different changes, and we've already worked through some changes, and so yeah, I think it's a really good question. It's one I don't fully know, for instance, but I think with the technology that we have, we're positioned really well to.
I think maybe it's redefining what's comfortable versus. Oh, my mic has died. Okay.
You're the one.
I was the one. It was my heartbeat. I apologize. Let's close with this, Gary. What are the questions that maybe people are not asking that maybe they should? It doesn't mean that they're afraid to ask them, but maybe they just haven't, in sort of their own journey at their own institution or where they work, maybe they're a provider as well, they're supplementary services to some degree. What questions are not being asked that we should be thinking about? They might address today, but we actually need to have them sort of front of mind for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's always good, because along the way for this project, it's been amazing in terms of how the project team has said, we could do this, or we could do that, because AI is just saying, wow, this is really an intriguing aspect. And being able to share that type of information, or at least have those discussions, and you get down that road, and you gotta say, well, wait a minute, we've got to finish this project first, we got to do this first, before we can worry about expanding to some other capabilities that we have utilizing data sets. Because as Sean alluded to, and unfortunately Dave Barnett couldn't attend to be on this panel as well too, he's a key player in this role as interim CEO at Kern. And I think him and Sean and the project team that have been focusing on this, we keep running into those opportunities. And so to your point of your question, what did we didn't know? We don't know what we don't know. I know that's a cliche, but AI is so new. What we can do with it is still continuing to grow. Agentic AI is right there. It's opening the door to what we can envision and to what we can help move forward for our students. There's so much that can be out there. And in coordinating with the functional users on how we could supplement their ability to do their job, not replace it, I'm not a fan of that, how we can supplement the information they have to do their jobs as effective as possible to benefit our students is huge. I look at how this impacts students, just as one project here, both, you can look at fraud as well too, of the immediate impact. It's not an 18-month project. It's not a 21-month project. It doesn't go down the road. We'll get to it later. These are fast turnover. And the speed of this technology is going to continue to evolve quicker. And that's one of the things that we have to share. You go back to old guys like me saying Moore's Law. It's a very common hypothesis in technology of how fast things evolve and the benefit. Moore's Law dealt in months. We're talking days. It's changing that fast, and be able to share that with our colleagues on the impact, I think is astronomically valuable in terms of what's unlimited out there.
It's a great point of being sort of comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'll close with this. I saw a story just this week. There was a company that did a test last year at this time. It was a certain project. It took 3 months and several employees to complete. They did the same project, same start, one employee, 37 minutes.
Yeah, it's evolved. I mean, you know, the way I explain it, sometimes when I do panels or discussions, or even my own discussions with various teams, I remember a tagline, and this is very marketing oriented, but it's not designed to be. We need to understand the leadership behind AI, because people, this is as slow as it gets.
That's exactly right.
And it's evolving much faster. And wait until the agents manage agents on the front end. That's just not far down the road.
No, that's next week, right?
Yeah. It's mind-blowing what you can eventually accomplish out of this.
Well, thank you both. Let's have a nice round of applause for Sean and Gary.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to take a 10-minute bio break.